All right, so now we're gonna come down to the final two dimensions of empowerment, and this next one is self-determination. And it's funny because I think that most people, when they hear of a term empowerment, this is the only dimension they think about, right? When I say I'm going to empower someone, the only thing most people think about is, oh, I'm going to be given a task and I'm going to be allowed to do it. And so it's self-determination. And so our definition of self-determination is the sense of ownership that a person has over their assigned responsibility, achieved through the decisions that are theirs to make. And so, hopefully these other dimensions of empowerment are helping to give you some more flesh on this idea of what empowerment looks like, because it is so much more than somebody just being given a task. I mean, that's kind of delegation. But self-determination kind of takes it to that next level of saying, well, it's delegation and you get to choose a few of the ideas. And I've got a number of stories about this, but I want to kind of just share with you some of those ways that we increase self-determination. I'll share those as we talk. So the first one is, identifying areas that are set and define what seasonal employees have control over. So basically what this means is, look, in our organization, there are things that have to be done a specific way. If as a accounting firm, you have a specific software that you use, that's what we're going to use as seasonal employees. That's not a choice that seasonal employees get to make, right? We have specific practices in place for a reason. But there might be other things that they have some control over. And if we can frame those for them by saying, hey, look, this is what needs to be done from you, but then here's some things that we want you to have some control over. Maybe it's about the way that they interact with the client. Maybe it's about the way that they kind of submit the work to you after they use the software. But identify those small things that they can have some control over. And I read a book. I think the guy's name was Alan Randolph, and he talked about how empowerment needs boundaries. That a lot of us think the most empowering statement out there is, "Hey, I want you to do this task. I want you to make it the best." And so it's totally open. But think about how terrifying that is, right? What is the best to you? I don't know. But if we give them some boundaries for empowerment by giving them specific things that are theirs to do, and then allowing them to make those decisions, but also knowing what's not negotiable, that helps people to feel empowered, and it also helps them to be innovative. The second one is understanding what your seasonal employees are doing and ask your employees what they think could be improved. So when we give people opportunities to do things on their own, we also need to give them that empowering feeling of saying, and then I want you to tell me what worked best for you. Because, we as an organization, we're always trying to get better. You tell me what worked and what didn't work. And that's very empowering, and it also allows me to have some self-determination, right? That, hey, I can share with my leader the things that are working for me and the things that aren't. The third one is we need to work as a team and decide how to accomplish our work. This is another piece of this where, we talked about before building relationships. Well, as part of building relationships, that's another way we can help people find self-determination is who they work with and who they interact with. And so if we do that, we can help them to kind of have their own creation of tasks and how they're going to accomplish the work that they need to accomplish. And then finally, create ways for information to be shared with leadership. I always when I work with organizations, I call this the suggestion box problem. Almost all McDonald's have suggestion boxes, but most of the time, if you go and open them, there's a sugar packet in there or some ketchup packets maybe. And it really does make you wonder what's happening with those suggestions, right? Well, in our company, do employees ever feel that way? Do they ever feel like we're not listening to them? Because, hey, I have an open door policy, but unfortunately, I'm always on the phone. If we have this kind of suggestion box problem where we say there's a way for them to get information, but we haven't created an actual tool, it's really hard for people to feel like they have that self-determination in that way that they can reach out to you as a leader. And so I think that's another one that we could really take on is creating a specific way to help people to share with leadership the challenges that they're facing. The final dimension of empowerment is trust. And trust is basically defined as a multifaceted aspect of empowerment. It involves the trust between the person being empowered and the person empowering, but it also involves the inverse, right? Me as a leader, do I trust the person that I'm leading and that I'm empowering? And you kind of get that image with this picture. If any of you have ever climbed mountains or done rappelling or rock climbing, there's a lot of trust involved in that. There's trust that me as the person going up the mountain, that person's not going to drop me. There's trust in my equipment. There's trust all over this process. And so I think it's really critical that we think about trust as another way that we increase empowerment. And it does have to go both ways. There's no question about it. So methods for building trust. The first one is developing clear expectations of the company. If people don't know what's expected of them, and again, going back to that boundaries of empowerment, then it's really hard for them to be successful. I could think of a number of examples of this where leaders have come in and they've said, look, like I want my people to feel like they can be innovative, that they can do things, that they can take on new challenges. Well, that's great, but what we also need to outlay is what that looks like, right? Like if somebody is innovative, how do we want them to share that innovation? We need to set those expectations as a company and as a group. And of course, the other piece of that is that we have to stick to those expectations for all. So if we set expectations, we better follow up with them. And we better make sure that those are the expectations across the board. And that can be really helpful. Another piece of this trust is involve employees in as much communication as possible. If people feel disconnected, then they're not going to be there. They're not going to feel like they're a part of the organization. And that trust is going to be really hard for us to get. And so as much as we can, we need to communicate with our seasonal employees. And that, I would say that's even year round. If you identify some seasonal employees that you want to bring back, and maybe it's all of them, but maybe there's a few specific if you're in a smaller firm, find ways to communicate with them year round. Maybe it's inviting them to your organization Christmas gathering or holiday gathering. Maybe it's the idea of, just kind of sending out a monthly newsletter or whatever it is. However you can communicate with them year round, that helps them to feel connected, but it also builds that trust. And keep in mind, when we talk about trust going both ways, the more that we communicate with them, the more of it they're going to feel trusted, and so they're going to be more engaged in their work, right? That's the goal. And then, of course, another one, helping seasonal employees build relationships with you as a leader and coworkers. So what are we doing to facilitate that? Do we look at seasonal employees as people who are only here for a short time, or are we helping them to build relationships, intentional relationships? And so maybe it's that, at the close of a really busy season, we have a social gathering where we help them to connect with us as a leader and also their coworkers. Or maybe it's kind of throughout, maybe it's throughout that busy season. You have some of your full-time employees just reach out to seasonal employees and say, hey, maybe it's a mentor program, or maybe it's just a connection program where they just reach out and say, hey, just want to check in, see how the work's going. Is there anything I can do to support you? And just kind of try to do intentional ways to build those relationships. And then finally, find ways to involve them in decision making. If there are specific things that you use for seasonal employees, whether it's specific equipment, specific software, specific ways that things have to be done, one of the great things that I've found with organizations that have a lot of seasonal employees is that they bring them together and they talk about expectations, and then they talk about ways that they want to be communicated with. And so you kind of set as a group these norms and these ways that we're going to connect. And then I, as a seasonal employee, I feel trusted. And I also now have ways for you as a leader to build trust with me. Because if I ask for something and then you do it, that trust just really increases. And it can become a really powerful way for us to engage and to build that level of trust. As we wrap up, I do just want to recap the idea of empowerment. There are these 5 dimensions, and we've talked about each one individually. In the literature, in the research around this, what they have found is that you need all 5 dimensions to be fully empowered. We can all go out and do good work, right? If we don't have any of these, or if we have 1 or 2 of these. But as a leader, if I can hit all 5, if I can help people to feel trusted, if I can help people to have self-determination, a sense of meaning, personal consequence, and self-efficacy, there is going to be a lot more to be done in my organization. And they're going to be more successful. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to be better with their clients. And they're also probably going to stick around for another season.
Real fast, couple questions to answer that we have with some of the folks that are here. On this one, there's a kind of a skeptic thing that says, again, this is all great, and there's a lot of things to throw in there, but how do we do that when it gets busy? Like when the business hits the fan, how do we actually go back and do these? What do you say for leaders that are trying to implement large changes?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about preparation before, and that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is, as a leader, if I find myself in those situations a lot, then I might have a succession plan problem, right? If I don't have a group of leaders around me that are buying into my mentality and the way that I do things, in terms of empowerment and how I work with people that I can rely on in those really busy times, that's another problem, right? That I need to be developing the leaders around me so that it doesn't all just fall to me. But then the next one that I also encourage you to think about, if you find yourself in those situations where it's a very challenging time, it's very busy, and that's always when things seem to fall, I think the other thing that we can do is we can think about our organizational culture. And we can think about the culture that we've developed and the culture that we want to develop, and think about, okay, if this is how it is now, what am I going to do next year to make sure that this doesn't happen again, right? And again, I mean, it's really hard. I mean, absolutely, that's real life, right? Like it's busy at specific times, but there's so much that we can do as leaders to increase our capacity, but also increase the capacity of our team to make it possible for us to handle those situations with a lot less stress. And I've definitely found that with the IT, the technology side, they're always putting out fires in that industry. And yet that's how we've talked about this. This is an investment. This isn't just about developing people. It's an investment in our organization's capacity.
So, John, just as we're wrapping up, there's other courses that they can take. Obviously, there's a lot of information, but specifically on this kind of topic, if this has been engaging, what's a good resource for them to go out and begin to find more out about this topic, and where can they get more information?
Yeah, and I'm happy to be a resource. I mean, this is something that I don't just teach and consult on, but I'm also really passionate about this in my own work and in my own experience. I think that it's just such a powerful thing to do for our organizational growth, but I think it's also the right thing to do because it helps people to kind of get that next level in their development as leaders. The second, another place you can go is the Center for Positive Organizations at the University of Michigan has a number of resources, as well as David Cooperrider has a number of other kind of tools for leaders. There's a lot of books on the topic around empowerment, and positive leadership is one of the kind of terms that goes with it. But those are places that you can go to get more information.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. And thank you, John, for being part of our presentation today. And thank you for attending today. We appreciate you taking the time. We hope that you'll take other courses with us. We've got great presenters like John. John's actually got some other courses with us, and we hope you'll check those out as well. Some great things on leadership and helping you out. As you can see on the screen right there, there are some extra resources, some ways to contact John, other things that you can go out and find if you're curious about more. We really sincerely appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.